Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Excellent. Well, this is certainly a great space to talk in. If you don't mind, I'm probably going to go very long tonight just because the space is so excellent. I was here, I just talked with my friend Anna, I was here 4 years ago, the last time, to do a talk not so far from here over at Copacabana. And at that time, I received a phone call from New York from Jay-Z's assistant. Do you guys know who Jay-Z is?
Yeah.
Okay. And she was very excited. She said, Jay-Z wants you to do his new cover. And I said, well, that's very flattering, but we actually do not design CD covers anymore. So I'm sorry, but I'm sure you won't have a lot of trouble to find another good designer. And she said, yeah, but we're in a hurry. And I said, well, that's not really gonna change my mind. So no, sorry, we really don't do this anymore. And she said, but he already has an idea. Well, that didn't really change my mind, of course. And then she said, but wouldn't you just at least want to come and meet him? And I had never met a rapper before, so I thought, sure, I'll go in and meet Jay-Z. And so, when I was back in New York, I went up to 57th Street, and he's in the same building that the advertising agency Ogilvy and Mather is, and he has this gigantic corner office, all in white leather. He sits there with his underlings, like 15 or 12 underlings around it. He wears a terrible tracksuit with the Frank Muller watch and all the bling bling. It's very much like, little Stefan would imagine meeting the big rapper. And when I come there, he has this book of ours, the first book, Made You Look, there, and he says, this is what I want. So clearly, nobody has told him that we're not designing his CD cover. They're all too afraid of him, and the assistant that had called me is also there, so I don't want to embarrass him. I don't want to embarrass her. And I say, well, it's not really interesting for us to design the same thing we've already done before. We already did this trick on the book, so I'm sure you understand it's not all that much fun for us to do the same thing again. And he says, well, I'm trying often things out on a smaller stage and then do them big in the stadium. How many books did you sell of Made You Look? And I said, well, about 50,000. And he says, well, our first print run is 5 million. So that's an argument, so I understand that. And I leave the meeting without telling him that we're not going to do the CD cover. But I still don't want to do it. So the next day, I sent him a crazy estimate. To give you roughly an idea, like when we did the Stones cover, I think we charged them somewhere $45,000. And so I sent Jay-Z an estimate, $97,000. And with the hope that that's just gonna shut them up and they're gonna go away. And it worked. Didn't hear from them again. I thought, great, done. Another one off my plate. 2 weeks later, the same assistant calls and says, you are crazy, this is the most expensive estimate we've ever heard. The most we've ever paid was $50,000 for a Bon Jovi record. This is Universal now, the mother company. And that's only because it had so much problems, so we would offer you 50. And I said, well, no, thank you so much. but we can't do it. And I knew that they had a very, very tight deadline. So 3 days later she calls again and she says, well, now JC puts $25,000 of his own money in, 75. And I said, no, sorry, we can't do it. Another 3 days later, another 2 days later, she calls and says, okay, here you go. Jay puts the rest of the money in, he paid the 97,000. So then I had to do it. But there was only 2 days left to do it now. And there was a photo shoot scheduled for the next day in London. There was not enough time for me to fly over to London. So I just called the photographer on the phone and art directed over the phone. And the next day we delivered the final cover. It sort of looked like a bad version of Made You Look. It wasn't very good. So on the album, on the vinyl version, we just took our name off the record, and now it says there, designed by 97,000. The good part, of course, was that it was exactly 4 years ago, it all happened just then before Christmas, that we started the next year with a pretty nice bank account and didn't have to care for the first 3 or 4 months in that year, if we made money or didn't make money. So it actually all worked out nicely. Now the last, about a year and a half ago, while Wilgo had mentioned it, while on sabbatical, I started working on a movie on happiness, and more concrete, not just about anybody's happiness, but about my own happiness. The idea really is, or was, to figure out if I can train my mind in the same way that I can train my body. Meaning that a number of years ago, I trained for a year, even though I'm not a very sporty person, and I ran a New York Marathon. I wasn't very fast, but I definitely completed the New York Marathon, and in that year, I got incredibly better at running. So the challenge here is to see if it's possible to train my mind in the same way and get incredible better at happiness. Now, I started a year and a half ago, and in these 18 months, not all that much happened. So the only thing that I still have right now that's fairly complete is the titles for the film. In typical stupid graphic designer fashion. There was also a reason for it, because in the beginning of this year, my mother died, and I really didn't feel like working on a film about my happiness. Even though I realized during that time that my unhappiness would be just as worthwhile to look at, and I should capture it on film, but I just didn't have the energy to even, get a team in, or leave alone the energy to turn the camera on. So we're not that far, but we have the titles. I can show those quickly. So we first started giving this typography to pigs, and pigs make them, and it came out possibly just a little bit too funky. So we redid them, we did them again, in this case with a goose, and I think the goose did a pretty nice job, but maybe a little bit too filigree, maybe a little bit too girlish, too feminine at the end. So we redid it. This was all still done in Indonesia, and my studio was very close to the monkey forest. So we trained these monkeys to be able to put 3 different words together. But you see the X height is a little bit too low, the curling is not correct, it's like just has things wrong with it. So, of course, whatever you don't do yourself is never done properly. These are our gardener and his friends climbing up the trees in front of the studio at the Sayan Gully in Bali. What I did do though in that year and a half was, that's very easy, I did read a lot of psychology books. And I won't bore you with all of the content, but I quickly summed it up for you what I have learned about happiness. It turns out that men and women are about on the same level of happiness. So it doesn't really matter if you're born a girl or a boy. By and large, gender plays no role. A very surprising thing for me is that the climate plays no role. San Diego has been voted the best climate in the United States, and Buffalo, New York is the shittiest climate of the United States. But if you make a survey, the people in Buffalo are just as happy as the people in San Diego. And I think that comes from adaptation. People just get used to a climate. Because if you ask people in Buffalo on a sunny day, they are much happier than they are on a rainy day. But of course they are, because it rains all the time, so when it's a real event when the sun shines in Buffalo. Similar, income plays a surprisingly little role. Like it plays a big role if you have no money, and all the way up to $50,000 a year, it actually does play a huge role, but from then on, it's almost not measurable if you make the difference of happiness between if you make $50,000 a year, or $500,000 a year, or $5 million a year. On a similar way, race plays no role. White people are as happy as black people, and vice versa. And age plays a tiny little role, meaning that old people are ever so slightly, measurably so slightly happier than young people are. If you are ugly, you will be just as happy as if you are a supermodel. If you have health problems that are manageable, I'm not talking about things where you're in pain, but if the health problems are manageable, you are as happy as if you are completely healthy. And here it starts to break down. Here there's big differences. If you have a lot of friends, and if you have deep friendships, you will be much happier than if you are lonely. So now it turns out that the woman on the right is actually happier than the guy on the left, or will be happier, and very similar at the very end. If you are married, you are happier than if you're single. So according to this, I definitely not be happy considering I am single, and I am not a religious person. Which is not bad for me to make a happiness movie, because who wants to watch a movie that starts out as a happy guy? You have to be happy at the end and overcome all sorts of, terrible challenges, which still lie ahead of me. Now, out of all of the psychologists that I've read and met, probably the most interesting one is a guy called Jonathan Haidt, who is from the University of Virginia. And he talks about the conscious and the unconscious mind, like a small rider, the conscious, on the gigantic elephant, the unconscious. And the rider thinks that he can tell the elephant what to do, but the elephant really has his own agenda. And it's only over time, over long periods of time, that the rider can hope to train the elephant a little bit. And Jonathan Haidt's theory is if the elephant and the rider work together, the unconscious and the conscious mind work together, that would lead to a full life. Now, I was born in Austria, but I live in New York City. My dad had a store for clothing. I became a designer. And I already said I'm not married. So I made the important decisions in my life, I made them myself. Now, if I would have been born in Austria 50 years earlier, the chances are that I would have married the woman that my mom told me to marry. I would have for sure stayed in the town that I was born in, because it would have been a gigantic effort to leave that town. And very much likely, I would have joined my dad in the store. I would have been in the same profession that my dad had. So this is really a new thing for humankind, that over the, I would say, 3 most important decisions that we can make in our lives, we actually have control over. And so it's quite interesting that even in those 3 most important decisions, who do I marry, where do I live, what do I do, the unconscious mind still plays a role in a way that we don't quite understand. And so this is all from statistics about the United States. If there is a guy called George and he thinks, where should I move? Should I go to Florida or to Nebraska? Somehow Georgia sounds the best to George. And if there is a guy called Dennis, and he's not quite sure what he wants to become, does he want to become a doctor or a lawyer? Somehow dentist sounds best to him. And if Paula thinks about should she marry Paul or Jack, Paul just sounds somehow better. And it's surprising and somehow crazy that even in those most important decisions, it turns out there are more Georges living in Georgia, there are more Dennises who are dentists, and more Pauls married to Paula than there would be statistically viable. Now, when I first read this statistic, and I have to admit, the differences are small, but they are definitely measurable. I thought, well, I don't know, these are these stupid Americans that this happens to, that are led around by these, just coincidences of names that make these big decisions out of silly reasons. And then I looked at my own family. I discovered that my mom, Carolina, married my dad, Carl. And my grandmother, Josephine, married my granddad, Joseph. Now, I did this talk in Curitiba yesterday, and I wondered if there was a Stephanie in the audience. There was none. Maybe Brazil is the wrong country to look for Stephanies. Now, if I think about design and think about happiness within design, it of course, the easiest answer to this question is, can I just do more of the things that I like and do less of the things that I don't like? And of course, for this, it's very, very helpful to know what actually are the things that I like. Now, I've been born 5 miles from the German border, so I'm a big list maker. I do things quite in mythology, so of course I made a list for this. Number 1, I very much enjoy if I'm able to think about a project without being anxious, when the deadline is still very, very far away. And I'll show you an example. We had a lot of time to think about. The client told us about this project almost a year before it was due. And so I was just thinking about it here and there. I knew it was very, very far away. The client is BMW, and we had to design a book for them, so it actually was quite natural to make a book that drives. It comes with a remote control, and you can drive it around your living room or the street or whatever. This is still the prototype. In the meantime, they were produced, but the production in China was quite a little nightmare to get this thing done. Definitely helpful is traveling. What I'm doing right now, being back in Rio de Janeiro, I always find that this increases my possibility for a good mood by quite a bit. And I also travel, not just for talks, but I travel a lot for work. I can show you this example of a chair we designed in Indonesia, clearly very much influenced also by the local craft culture. I could have never designed that chair while being in New York in the studio. And number three, not being stuck behind the computer screen all day. You know, I am now, I don't know, a designer since a long time. I think since 25 years. And when I started design, and I'm not nostalgic about this, but I think it's a simple fact that when I started design, there were so many different tools that you used maybe on a single project. Could be silkscreen, could be lithography, could be pen and ink, could be painting, that by itself made the day, I mean, sometimes troublesome, but by and large it mixed up the day and it made it varied. While right now, considering all the tools are unified on the screen, it's very difficult to not sit behind the screen all day, every day. So here and there, we devise a project that just uses an incredible amount of different techniques. You know, where it's painting and hand typography and computer typography and illustration and markers, all into photography, all combined into a single poster. In this case, it's for a show that we had in France. Of course, I run my own design studio. I always kept it very small. It's, even though we are now 18 years old, it's still only myself, 3 designers, 2 interns, no secretaries, no account servicing people. And because I kept it small, like when we received more jobs than we could do, instead of hiring more people, I just started to say no, which of course allowed us to pick and choose among our clients. Of course, we would take the best ones and not do the not so good ones, which also means that I'm actually in the position to choose the kind of clients that I want to work with and do projects that really matter to me. The example that I'm showing here is for a group called True Majority. They want to cut the military budget and increase the education budget. They basically want to double the American education budget. And we did many projects for them. The group is very successful. It actually looks like that we're going to achieve our goal, cutting the military budget and doubling the education budget. And there was one thing that I wanted to do almost from the beginning, and the client always said no, and I always brought it up again. Like, this was going on for a period about 5 years of the client saying no, and I said, no, but we have to do this project. And the client saying no, and I said, yeah, but how about this project? So finally we did get it done. A double the education budget bus that drives around the United States. It's driven by volunteers. Because of its shape, it winds up on TV news a lot, where then the anchorman or the anchorwoman are forced to basically explain what this is about, so we get our subject onto TV news without having to pay extra for it. And it really worked out. The cost of this bus to make is exactly the same as a single page advertisement in the New York Times, but of course it lasted so very much longer. And of course there is always a joy involved when a project winds up fine, when it comes back from the printer or from the programmer the way you thought it. In this case, a very small project after the bus. It's just a business card for an animation company called Sideshow. That's one of those lenticular cards that, you know, changes when, depending on how you look at it. it helps, of course, when the things that we do are actually effective. And there was a German woman coming to us. Her husband had died 2 years earlier, and her husband was a painter, but a good unknown German painter. And she made it her life goal to popularize. She very much believed in the artwork of her husband, and she made it her life goal to really popularize this work. I liked the work. It was in between science and art, so we made this quite complex 3D fractal plastic cover for 5 different books that show 5 different strands of his work, and it worked. The biggest German TV station just made a portrait on him. There were many articles in Stern and Spiegel that are the important magazines in Germany, and it seems that her life goal is actually happening. And last one, of course, it is wonderful to know that if I really go out and do something totally new and mix it with stuff that I already know, that this is probably my best strategy to do the kind of work that fulfills me. If I only do work that I already know, I'm getting unbelievably bored and the work goes down. If I try to do work that I don't know how to do at all, I get too anxious and I just have too many butterflies. So it seems to be the mixture where it's at. And we did this year a TV commercial for a bank in Asia. Can we have some sound for it? Hello, Mr. Soundman. Can we get some sound? I think you just have to turn the sound up. I hear it slightly, so... Okay, so...
In fact, be great.
I just started again. I started from the time. And we don't have the sound again? Oh, okay. Oh, here we go.
Can a bank really stand for something? Can it balance its ambition with its conscience? To do what it must, not what it can. As not everything in life that counts can be counted. Can it not only look at the profit it makes, but how it makes that profit? And stand beside people, not above them, where every solution depends on each person. Simply by doing good, can a bank, in fact, be great? In the many places we call home, our purpose remains the same. To be here for people, here for progress, here for the long run, here for good.
So, I mean, clearly I knew about typography, but I had no idea how to do a TV commercial. So I think that somehow, that combination worked well together. Now, if I look at my life in the West, we normally spend the first 25 years learning. Then there's another 40 years of working tucked on, and then there's another 15 years of retirement. And then basically we die. Unless you're a woman, then you have another 2 years, and then you die. And that's just how it is. So I thought it would be helpful to take 5 of these retirement years and just divide them evenly into among these working years. Not only will it be a lot of fun, But also, probably even nicer, is that all the work that I'm doing in the yellow years then have a chance to influence the working years that come afterwards, so it will flow back into society. And I'm also very much convinced that when I actually will retire, I'm going to be a much better retiree because I already have so many possibilities to try it out throughout my regular working life. Now, the same psychologist that I mentioned before, Jonathan Haidt, he talks about work in these three categories. You can either see it as a job, that you probably need a hobby to compensate for your time that you're at work, and you likely will think about the weekend starting by Wednesday or Thursday, and you can't wait until it's 5 and the job is over. You can think of it as a career where you're much more interested in the whole thing, and at the same time, you might have this nagging feeling, is all this hard work really worth my while? And then you can see it as a calling where you probably would do your job also if you wouldn't get paid. Now, if I think back when I was a student, or even if I look at my own students right now, we definitely saw design as a calling. And even though I very much wound up with exactly the kind of studio that I had always wanted, small, doing design for the music industry, just by repetition, just by the fact that the 20th CD cover wasn't as much fun as the first CD cover, my job came from, or work went from a calling to a career and then even to a job. And I think that the best way that I found to make my job a calling again was really through these sabbaticals. This is a photo from our studio in Bali. This was from 2008 to 2009. I had chosen Bali out of many reasons. One was beautiful landscape, kind and calm people, fantastic craft culture. Many people really do wonderful things with their hands. What I had not known was that there is an unbelievable amount of wild dogs pretty much anywhere. And when I arrived there, they surrounded my house everywhere. So the first job that we did was actually to portrait all of the 99 dogs that surround our house. Every dog got its own t-shirt. Individually, and then we had this slightly threatening message on the back. So many dogs, so few recipes. While I was in Indonesia, my studio in New York got renovated, and that studio needed furniture. In Indonesia, it was fairly easy to get that stuff done. You can just hand this sketch over to some wood covers, and then I think by the time this lamp was designed, we had made peace with the dogs. There was also a table, a coffee table that came with about 300 different compasses, and also had quite magnetic coffee cups that make those compasses go crazy. I did start meditation in Bali, and I have to say that in Bali it really worked wonderfully. And I don't just mean that I enjoyed the meditation itself, I did that, but that it colored my day afterwards in a very positive way, to the point where colors were stronger. I myself felt that I was more connected, almost like getting stoned on weed, without getting stoned on weed. And without being stoned, like all the positive effects of it, with all the negative ones gone. Which is pretty damn good. And as soon as I got back to New York, all that stuff was gone. It's just too busy in New York, there's too much stuff in my head, so it didn't really work while I was in New York, sadly enough. I did bring a couple of books to Bali and read, among many others, this guy's book. His name is Danny Gilbert. He's a psychologist at Harvard. And one of the interesting things that I found out was that the book that I brought was actually written on sabbatical by him. And so I'll talk a little bit about other guys that did a sabbatical. His name is Ferran Adrià. I think that he's probably the best chef in the world right now. He runs a restaurant called Il Bulli, north of Barcelona. He is open 6 months of the year, and then he closes, and he does 6 months worth of experiments with the full kitchen staff. The food is unbelievable. Last December, I was lucky enough to get a reservation. It was by far the best dinner I've ever had in my life. I mean, to the point where if I call this dinner, then my second best dinner wasn't dinner. It was something else. And he had, last year he served 8,000 meals. That's the amount of meals he can serve in the 6 months that he's open. And he had 2.2 million requests for reservations. Some other companies, if you divide if you look for the percentages, since I do a sabbatical every 7 years, well, 7 years of work, 1 year of sabbatical, that's 12.5% of my time. 3M, the chemical companies, they give since 1930, all of their engineers 15% of their time to do whatever they want with it, and Google, very famously, gives 20% of their time to all employees to use how they see fit. Now, Post-it notes came out of this for 3M, Gmail came out of this for Google, so it clearly works out for the companies themselves very, very well. The way my sabbatical had happened was that originally I thought, I don't want to make a plan. I'm just leaving this open space of time in front of me. And that was a total disaster. When I had all this time in front of me, I did email returning, coffee making, video bring backing, having to go to the loo, making some more coffee. At the end of the day, I had absolutely nothing done. And I realized that the desire, of course, was to work on something new. And I realized that doing this is actually very hard. That it's much, much easier to return emails, or it's even easier to work on client work because I know how to do that stuff. I know how to design a branding campaign than it is to work on something new. So I had to get rid of it and really make a plan. And I wound up with this plan very much modeled after the plan, the hourly plan that I had in grade school. I had just made a list of all the things that I really wanted to pursue, divided them up into, well, made them into a hierarchy. What do I really want to do? What do I don't want to do that badly? Make a weekly schedule out of this and adhere to it. So you have, Monday 8 to 9 story writing, 9 to 10 future thinking, and so forth and so on. And I needed this for about the first 3 months, and then I could forget about it because then there were so many projects running that I didn't really need the schedule anymore. Many things came out of it. It was a lot of fun. If I look at the whole 8 years, it was actually even financially successful. And probably most importantly, If I look at the 7 years that followed the first sabbatical, almost everything we designed in that year that I still liked had its origin in thinking from that sabbatical year. And I'll quickly, or maybe not quickly, actually no, for the rest of this presentation, talk about the 2 ideas that came out of this first sabbatical. Idea number 1, that branding, that the idea of sameness in branding is overrated. We designed many branding identities since that really came directly out of this idea. I'll show you one, but as I mentioned, we've done many. So this is Casa de Música, a music center in Porto, in Portugal, built by the Dutch star architect Rem Koolhaas. I had originally promised the client that we're not going to do an architectural logo, because I had always hated these architectural logos that basically just talk about the architecture but not about the content of this organization. And this was a great, great music center with wonderful music, very, very dense, from rock to hip-hop to classical to raves. I mean, it's about the whole gamut of music. And the client actually accepted this. He said, yeah, it's fine. I don't need the architecture in the identity. And we worked on it for 2.5 months when I found out that I had to give up, that I couldn't make an identity without the architecture. The shape of the building was just too strong. And I found out that Rem Koolhaas himself thought of the building as a logo. He didn't directly call it a logo, but he talked about it in architectural terms that basically meant that he thinks it's a logo. And once I realized this, I thought, well, then that would make it easy, because in this case, if I look at the building itself just as a 3D, very high-res version of a logo, then I can bind it into a whole slew of systems. So we put the mask on the building, dug down into the ground, looked at it from all sides, and then just stopped it 6 times. 1 time the west, the east, the south, the north, the top, and the bottom. So we wound up with these 6 shapes that we then colored in a very peculiar way, using a piece of custom designed software called the Casa de Música logo generator. So if you have a Beethoven picture, you put it into the scanner that's connected to the software, and within a fraction of a second, you will get a Beethoven Casa de Música logo. Now, if it turns out that you have to do a Beethoven poster, this Casa de Música logo will always fit beautifully on the poster, because it's the same thing. It's the same visual information than in the big picture. And if Frank Zappa's music is performed, as it was, the logo will look like this. If it's Lou Reed or the Chemical Brothers, the logo will look like this. If it's internally, like the president of Casa de Música or the musical director, their visual portraits are put onto their business cards. And then this goes on. So there is a sub-brand, a full-fledged orchestra, the Orquestra Nacional de Porto, living inside the building. This is a 105-people orchestra, and their identity is a much more transparent version of the whole thing. That's the truck that they go on tour with. And the remix ensemble, it's a much smaller orchestra, only 12 people. Where basically the logo remixes the name of the orchestra as it goes along. And then we made a couple of decisions. Porto is a town that is actually walkable. There's many, many pedestrian zones, and so a poster makes sense. Posters don't make any sense in most other countries around the world. It clearly makes no sense in the United States. And I would think from what I've seen, they make little sense in Brazil, because a car-depending society does not look at posters. Here, they did make a lot of sense, and we said, for the first year, let's just make all the posters limited to just using the logo as their visual expression. So this is Chopin, then you have Mozart, Lamont Young. You can take that shape and actually draw with it. You can grow that shape underneath the skin for a clubbing event. You can take it outside for a much more family-oriented event in front of Casa de Musica, or for a rave in the parking garage underneath Casa de Musica. There is a weekly program or educational services. The second insight. At that point, I was a designer maybe for roughly 20 years, and I figured by this point, I knew how to talk the language of design. Now, let's say I would learn the language of Portuguese, which I sadly am not able to speak, but let's say I would learn it, and I'll come back here in another 4 years, and I would speak Portuguese perfectly. Very much likely, I would talk in all directions with this Portuguese. I would maybe use it for work, but I for sure would use it privately. I might declare that I like a girl. I would use it all around in my life. And I discovered that strangely, the language of design, I just use it professionally. I just use it to promote and to sell, but I don't really use it in any sort of more private, more subjective kind of way. And from that insight, there came a possibility to develop when 2 clients, right after the sabbatical, offered us to do jobs that had an incredible amount of freedom attached to them. The first one was a magazine. The second one was the city of Paris. They offered us to do billboards. And both of them basically said, do something. Whatever it is, we don't care. The magazine said, we just want you to design 12 pages. Paris said, 5 billboards. I took on the jobs very happily, and it turned out, though, that it was much, much, much more difficult to do than I had expected. When there were no limitations, I had no clue what to do. And in the meantime, I'm a little bit smarter about it. I'm very much aware that how important limitations are to anything. I think that Brian Eno is very right when he talks about the electric guitar having become the most important instrument of the 20th century because it's such a stupid instrument. It can do just a couple of things, but they can do them very, very well. While, let's say, the synthesizer can do this gigantic amount of things, but it never became as important as the electric guitar. And we have an equivalent in design. Photoshop, Illustrator, particularly Photoshop, I think that because it can do so much, most people do shit in Photoshop. The best thing about Photoshop is Photoshop. I see very, very, very few people doing anything good, and I think the only people that do something good is that are the ones that see it extremely narrow, that use like just one tool and really work the shit out of this one tool. So I basically had to look for my own limitations, since the client said you can do whatever. And as long as I was in this whatever stage, I really had no clue what to do. At one time I even thought I'll just run old design pieces. And they would have been fine. I mean, as far as the magazine was concerned, I could have, I don't know, taken a water bottle and photographed the water bottle 12 times and put a water bottle with a different kind of water level on every page, and they would have been fine. Well, it didn't seem like such a great thing to do, though. So, in my desire to do something, I wound up looking through the diary. I've kept the diary for most of my life, and for about the last 15 years very diligently, at least once a week. And I found a list in this diary with this title, Things I've Learned in My Life So Far. I had written this list down very quickly with no desire to publish it or make a project out of it, just to find out what do I actually know so far. And of course, when I saw it, it seemed a possibility to really use it simply because of the fact that I knew that I wrote it down for myself in the diary, and I try not to lie to myself in the diary, so I knew that when I wrote them down, they must be true for me. And then I picked one of these things and made the magazine pages out of it. Everything I do always comes back to me. And at the beginning, this seemed somehow self-indulgent, but for lack of a better idea, we sent it out anyway. I had very little hopes for this thing. And surprisingly, we got a whole lot of great feedback from it. In the beginning, it was mostly people who wanted to hang this thing onto their toilet, but as it went on, we also got great feedback like this from a Buddhist monk from Seoul, Korea, who wanted to use it as a teaching device in a Buddhist monastery. So it was clear we're going to do the second one as well. This was for Paris, these are the billboards, so it says, trying to look good limits my life. They went up in Paris, this is how they looked. They were always shown, so you could see 5 at a time from one vantage point or consecutively on the highway. And again, we got great feedback. And of course, they were fun to do. There was a whole lot of freedom, and in that case, the limitations were set. It's going to be a sentence. We're going to do it in various pieces of typography, and I think that these were tight enough limitations to then go on and work on. And I still had a lot of these sentences. But no other client came and said, you can do whatever you want. But I wanted to do more, so I thought maybe I can just talk my existing clients into letting me publish my diary in their projects. And what we were working on at the time was a campaign for the School of Visual Arts in New York. They run a very big campaign, a poster campaign in the subway. The owner of the school had given me this sentence that basically said, come and study art at the School of Visual Arts in New York, and your life will be better. And I said, yes, yeah, I'll do it. It's a prestigious campaign to do. Many people that I admire had done it in the past, Milton Glaser and so on. And when I sat down and worked on this, not only didn't I have any idea, but even worse, when I thought about the sentence, I discovered that I don't even believe the sentence. Meaning, I actually don't believe that your life will be better if you study art at the School of Visual Arts or anywhere. I know a whole bunch of artists that are miserable. And I know many people who never studied art who are doing extremely well. So I thought, okay, I'll get rid of the sentence, and I put my own sentence on there. But then I thought, I just can't do this. If you look, maybe the 7th or from the top it says, assuming is stifling. So I thought, well, my assumptions that I can't do this, that the client won't go for it, this is really narrowing in. So I went for it, and he loved it. So the poster that hung throughout the subway system in New York, if you think about it, said exactly the opposite. Thinking life will be better in the future is stupid. Like thinking your life after studying art at the School of Visual Arts is stupid, will be better. I have to live now. And he loved it. I tried to make it pretty with butterflies and things so that that bitter pill would go down a little bit easier. Nevertheless, and we ran it then also at the side of buildings. Then what happened? We did that a couple of times successfully. I mean, it's pretty unbelievable, but I successfully talked clients out of their message and into my message. And then what happened was that clients who would have never came to us for CD covers or logos or whatever else we were famous at the time, came to us and said, we saw your sentences. We also want one of those sentences. In this case, it was the Scottish government. They said, we are doing for the first time a festival throughout Scotland, the 6 city festival. There's only 6 cities in Scotland. And we want a sentence, preferably one with 6 words, so that we could put a single word in every city. No problem. Everybody, always, thinks they are right. Got up in Scotland. There was some backwards and forwards. Should there be a logo, a 6-city logo on this monkey, or shouldn't there be? I was very adamant that there shouldn't be, because the idea, of course, was that that the 6 different monkeys, the 6 different words would be put together in the media, and the chances that the media will talk about this are going to be much bigger if there's no logo on it. And luckily, it turned out that I was right. We were on the cover of 2 Scottish newspapers. It was the lead story of BBC that evening, and there was a whole lot of brouhaha going on about the 6-city festival. Even newspapers who normally never talk about design had quite large articles about the monkeys and the 6-city festival. The monkeys also love to travel. You see them here in California. This is in New York, and this is in Miami. They are now in Louisville, Kentucky. They're going to go to Vienna, and they're going to wind up on the roof of the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, where with this sentence, everybody always thinks they are right. Of course, it's the absolute perfect place to be. You see here the roof of our studio in New York, making a billboard for Lisbon. This whole construction is made out of newsprint paper, and we put stencils, cardboard stencils on top of the newsprint paper and many leaves, and then let that lie around for about a week. And as you know, newsprint paper yellows significantly in the sun, so when we took the stencils and the leaves away, you could actually see the difference. Then we rolled the whole thing up and sent it over to Lisbon, where it was installed in a very, very sunny place. And you can see it here on the first day. It reads, complaining is silly, either act or forget, and then it fades, and after 1 week, there was no more complaining going on in Lisbon. A piece that was made out of many, many, many coat hangers to be placed into a street that was filled with fashion stores on the left and the right. and it says, worrying solves nothing. And it really neatly divided the street from one end of the street to the other. And a piece that was commissioned by the government of Singapore for outdoor LED screens. These are these large outdoor panels that also work during the daylight. And of course, because the sentence, keeping a diary improves personal development, talks about the diary, was probably particularly close to my heart. I do keep a diary since I was about 14, and I often go back and reread things that I have noted 5 years earlier. If I want to change something about myself for a long enough time, but I'm almost surprised how long it was that I've already wanted to change that, there's a better chance that I actually then go ahead and do something about it. And this is photographed underneath the microscope. So this is starting a charity is surprisingly easy, and a projection that can actually see the viewer and reacts to the viewer. So if you walk by it, you can't help but ripping the spiderweb into pieces. And then as soon as you're gone, the spiderweb rebuilds itself in a very similar fashion, like a spider would rebuild it if the spider could write. And it says, being not truthful always works against me. I talk about the setup quickly. So it's hardware-wise, it's completely off the shelf. It's an iMac with a GP camera and a projector. So the hardware costs maybe $3,000 or $4,000. The software is much more complex and was written by the same guy who also wrote the Casa de Musica logo generator that I showed before. Ralph Amer, he worked on this for about 8 months straight. He first made everything sensitive that you see here in green, so all the typography and the radial lines are made sensitive. And then gravity plays a very big role. This is why it moves fairly natural. That's why it looks like it's a real spiderweb. And then the camera, the hidden camera, delivers a picture that we then program to be very contrasty. And Ralph programmed a sort of force field around this digital picture from the camera. And wherever the force field hits the green lines, you have this interaction. The sentence, of course, being not truthful always works against me. Like all sentences, it's meant exactly how it's written. Lying just doesn't work for me. For once, I think I have much too bad of a memory, so I could never remember all the things that I lied about. So it's just, I do remember though the things that I at least believe to be true, so it just makes things much easier. There are 10 of these pieces around the world right now. One is very nicely installed in the Art Institute of Chicago. Money does not make me happy. first made as 12 pages, six double page spreads for a magazine. We worked very hard on it, delivered it to the printer. The printer managed to lose one set of these pages and was too afraid to tell us about it, and just reproduced that page themselves. And when we received the magazine as subscribers, it said, "Money does make me happy." There was nothing we could do about it. It was out, all 750,000 magazines printed. And I complained about this to a friend of mine who runs a museum in Austria, and he said, "Well, you'll have to do it again, you'll just have to run it again." But of course the magazine wouldn't run the full 12 pages again. So he managed to talk the owner of the largest casino into letting us wrap the casino. And so this is the pedestrian zone, so if you look up towards the casino, it just says money, and then if you look around the corner, it says, "Does not make me happy." And a piece for Amsterdam, commissioned by the city of Amsterdam, they gave us a plaza, quite a beautiful little place, surrounded on three sides by buildings, 6-story buildings, and a river on the fourth side. And the stone grid of this plaza basically inspired the piece. We got 650,000 coins from the Central Bank of Holland. And we could specify that we want a third in brand new, shiny euro cents, and we want a third in medium used ones, and a third very old ones. And then over a week, with the help of 100 volunteers, we put up this sentence that said, "Obsessions make my life worse and my work better." I very much believe in this sentence. You know, if I obsess privately, it's always terrible. But if I obsess about details at a job or at a piece of work, it can actually really become better. We definitely obsessed over this one. The idea here really is we made the typography as pretty as we could, so that when we were done, we could just all leave and have it unguarded, so anybody could decide, do I want to take as much money as I can carry, or do I want to leave the piece intact? And we painted the underside, the other side of all these coins in a very particular blue, so that we could track these coins all over Europe, and we had a website ready to go where we could see how these coins would go out throughout Europe. And we hoped something unexpected would happen. But we thought quite hard of various things that could happen, and kind of thought we had it under control. Now, what did happen was that as soon as we were done with the piece, that evening, and we all went away, a guy came with 2 plastic bags, and he took as much money as he could carry. And we of course counted on this, but one of the neighbors became very upset about this, and she called the police because she very much loved the piece. Now the Amsterdam police, they came, and they saw the piece, and they, in their wisdom, thought, "Oh, we have to protect this artwork. We have to put the coins into custody in police headquarters." So they swept everything up and took all the coins with them. And this video was also made by one of the neighbors out of the window of her apartment. So this is still us building it up. And here you see the cops sweeping it all up. So that basically after 6 hours, all that was left was this. And we didn't get our unexpected result. There was an exhibition about the whole series. There's also a book about the whole series. This was at Deutsche Projects in New York. there was a whole lot of bananas on the wall. This is on opening day. You don't see it on this very bright projector that well, but it read very clearly, self-confidence produces fine results. These are green bananas and yellow bananas that we had tested very carefully of how long they will take to turn green to yellow and so forth. So this is opening day. It was a 5-week exhibition. This is how they looked after 1 week, after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and 5 weeks. You can sort of see that the self-confidence almost came back, but not really. Throughout those 5 weeks, of course, it smelled unbelievably strong, like bananas in there. This is a photo that a visitor sent to us. And so since the last sabbatical is over, it ended last September, so I've been back at work in New York for now 14 months. We also did quite a bit of more regular, straightforward, more commercial design work. On one hand, because I wanted to fill the bank account again after the year of nothing coming in. On the other hand, and I mean, if that's not clear, of course, commercial work still pays the best out of all of the work that we do. So there was one reason, but there's another reason that I also really, that I was always very pissed that the designers that I really like and whose work I love mostly do small cultural projects around the world, while the really big projects, the projects that are printed in high numbers, the projects that are published worldwide, are often done by idiots who just care about money and don't care about the cultural impact of what they do, or they don't care about beauty, or they don't care about the things that I think it might be worthwhile to care about. So here are a couple of commercial projects, actually just one client from this year. This is for Levi's. This is a 501 taken apart into its ingredients. That's another 501, again taken apart, but just being put together differently. A poster about the button fly, still 501, and a billboard that's up in New York City right now, that's a typographic billboard that rolls over every 15 seconds. Now, many of the things that I showed today in this series, things I've learned in my life so far, I actually have incorporated into my life. Meaning that the rider has trained the elephant. Let's say if worrying solves nothing, that's not a problem of mine anymore. I really am not a big worrier. Or with complaining is silly, either act or forget, again, it's not a big deal anymore because I really am not a big complainer. I either do something or I shut up. With this one though, having guts always works out for me. I've known this for, I would say, 25 years, and still, to this very day, I have to talk myself into it anew every single time. I remember when I first thought about this was when I was a student in Vienna, and I took the subway, and there was this unbelievably beautiful, very old lady coming into the subway. She was about 85. She had a black coat, black hat, red roses in the hat, and she just looked fantastic. And I had this desire to tell her how great she looked, but not quite the guts to do so. And as I was thinking there, I was sitting there and thinking, should I tell her, should I not tell her, should I tell her, should I not tell her? It actually became her stop when she left the subway. It wasn't my stop, but just before the doors closed, I ran out as well, and I ran after her and I said, hey lady, wait up, I have to tell you something. you are just so unbelievably fantastic looking. And she got a huge kick out of this, and her face just lit up, and we wound up talking for about 20 minutes. And I thought, I'm gonna do this from now on every single time. And that's just not how it worked out. I still have to talk myself into it. Now, all during last week, we filmed around this quote for the happiness film. And the idea was that I would just have a camera team with me that during my regular day, and whenever there was a choice between doing the wimpy thing or doing the gutsy thing, I had to do the gutsy thing. I feel this week quite a bit, and I really did not look forward to it. And by and large, it just made the statement true again, because a couple of things, specifically, I mean, there were 2 client presentations going on in that week, and for both presentations, I had prepared work that either, in one case, I had no idea on how to do it, or in the other case, I was convinced that the client would never go for it. And in both cases, the client went for it, and I think we will be able to know, to figure out how to do that second project. For a second, I can also talk about this. I mean, I'm completely convinced that the reason for much mediocre work that we do, but also for much mediocre work that's done in the entire world, the main reason for this is not clients who kill that work. The main reason for this is designers who self-censor themselves and say, my client will never go for it. Going back to the sentence, we also redid that on film, but I'll still show it to you in photos. So this is the same thing, shot once from the front, then once from the back. It just go forward and backwards. Having guts built out of the furniture always works out for, with the light on,